Hi, I'm Diva from Musical Hell, and I know the score. What could be better than getting the chance to play a really memorable scenery-chewing bad guy? Playing a memorable scenery-chewing bad guy that gets to belt their lungs out, of course.
I'd rather just sing.
So, in this season of Monsters, Madmen, and General Weirdos, I'm taking some time to talk up my top 5 musical villains. Before we begin, I'd like to establish some criteria for the term villain. First, the character must be the antagonist of the story. Roxy and Velma in Chicago are pretty reprehensible people, but they're also the characters whose journey we follow and who, in a perverse way, we kind of root for, so they don't count. Second, the character must be evil. While Javert in Les Miserables is the antagonist of Jean Valjean, he's not a terrible person so much as he is unyielding and tragically misguided. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at some of the best worst characters the genre has to offer.
The most dishonest, disgraceful, disloyal, despicable villain
The world has ever seen.
we mean. He's mean. I'm mean.
Number 5. Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. I consider Gaston to be an underrated villain, and frankly, I blame his villain song. While other Disney bad guys get magnificently sinister tunes like Be Prepared, Friends on the Other Side, or Hellfire, Gaston's eponymous number is a rollicking music hall tribute to his ego. It's a great song, but it's more lighthearted and comical than anything else.
Not a bit of him scraggly or scrawny.
That's right. And every last inch of me's covered with hair.
But the closer you look at him, the nastier Gaston is. This is a guy who's willing to toss Belle's dear old father in an insane asylum to get her to do what he wants. And what does he want from her?
Sex!
Yes, long before Frollo was having his psychologically charged fireplace hallucinations, Gaston was a Disney villain motivated entirely by his desire to get into the heroine's pants. Okay, he does want to marry her first, but it's obvious that's just a means of getting her on her back and making his babies. The twisted thing is that Gaston literally has his pick of the girls, but he obsessively pursues the one who turns him down. Not because he has any interest in her personally, but because he's targeted her as the only prize big enough to satisfy his vanity.
But she's...
The most beautiful girl in town.
I know, but...
That makes her the best. And don't I deserve the best?
Well, of course.
Like a lot of great antagonists, Gaston is a dark reflection of his protagonist opposite. Both the Beast and Gaston are self-absorbed, indifferent to others' feelings, and prone to violence, but the Beast recognizes his bad behavior and changes it. Gaston, on the other hand, escalates it, and that's what ends up making the difference between a man and a monster.
Get out.
We mean. He's mean. I'm mean.
Number 4. The Thénardiers in Les Miserables. Hey, I said Javert didn't qualify for this list. These two are totally eligible. The conniving innkeepers of Montfermeil are Victor Hugo's embodiment of what in his day were called the undeserving poor. The crooks, cheats, and lowlifes who help perpetuate the misery that surrounds them. It's not just that they abuse poor little Cosette, extort money from Fantine, contributing to her tragic fall and demise, and steal everything that isn't nailed down, including their scenes. It's their attitude about it.
Beggar at the feast, master of the dance. Life is easy pickings if you grab your chance. Everywhere you go, law-abiding folk, doing what is decent, but they're mostly broke.
It's hard to make a villain who happily proclaims their villainy ring true, but the Thénardiers pull it off. Their gleefully unscrupulous demeanor is a symptom of their complete lack of empathy and social responsibility. As far as they're concerned, there's no justice in this world or the next, so why shouldn't they be out for all they can get?
Masters of the land, always in our share. Clear away the barricades and we're still there.
And the worst part is, they get away with it. The Thénardiers are like cockroaches. They're not only vile pests feeding on the dregs of life, they have a nasty habit of surviving just about everything that gets thrown at them. In a musical where nearly every major character is dead by the final curtain, these are two of the few survivors. Yet another facet of Les Miserables' great tragedy.
Damn!
I'm mean!
Number 3. Audrey II from Little Shop of Horrors. Even though it's now one of my favorite movie musicals, it was a long time before I could sit through Little Shop, and it's all because of Audrey II. That plant terrified me. Can you blame me? It's as big as a truck, it lives right on the edge of the uncanny valley, it speaks and sings in the wickedly soulful tones of Levi Stubbs.
Feed me Seymour. Feed me all night long.
However, it's not pure fear factor that makes Audrey II such a memorable villain, it's his insidious method. Little Shop of Horrors is ultimately a variation on the Faust legend, and Audrey II is Mephistopheles gradually and inevitably leading Seymour down the garden path to you-know-where. He has the poor dupe in for £1 almost before he realizes he's put in his penny. What, this plant feeds on human blood? Sure, it's bringing customers into the shop, so what's a few drops? Or a pint? More? Well, getting rid of a sadistic, abusive boyfriend is practically a good deed, right?
You need blood and he's got more than enough.
I need blood and he's got more than enough.
You need blood and he's got more than enough.
So go get it.
Audrey II is the kind of evil that grows to unmanageable proportions before the full extent of his malice is revealed. And whether you prefer seeing this mean green mother getting his just desserts or taking over the world, he ends up making a big impression. Whether you like it or not.
I'm mean!
Number 2. Judge Turpin from Sweeney Todd. You have to be pretty awful to come off as worse than an obsessed serial killer barber and his equally obsessed cannibalistic accomplice, and Judge Turpin fits the bill. We're all too familiar with the type: stern moral crusader on the outside, sexual deviant who abuses his power to his own ends on the inside. Such is the extent of Turpin's corruption that it ends up tainting his one good deed in the entire show. He takes in Sweeney's foundling daughter Joanna, which is decent of him. I mean, considering that he kind of had her father imprisoned on false charges and raped her mother, causing her to go insane and drink poison. But when Joanna grows up, the charity goes right out the window and the perving begins anew.
Dear child, how sweet you look in that light muslin gown.
Turpin's hypocrisy and sexual dysfunction are so unsettling that his big villain song is almost always cut from the production for being too intense. It's a chilling insight into his psyche as he alternately lusts over his lovely ward and brutally chastises himself for that lust, crescendoing until... Yeah, this is exactly what you think it sounds like. Judge Turpin, too spicy even for Sweeney Todd.
I'm mean!
And the number 1 musical villain, the Nazis from Cabaret. Do I even need to explain why? They're Nazis. Since Cabaret is a story about how we ignore the evils of the world at our own peril, the Nazis are much more peripheral than the other villains on this list, but they're no less effective thanks to a little tune called Tomorrow Belongs to Me. This is one of the most disturbing villain songs in musical history because the horror of it is entirely dependent on the context. Taken by itself, it's a glorious anthem, inspiring even. And then they reveal who's singing it, and what they're singing it in tribute of.
You still think you can control them?
The juxtaposition of the beauty of the song and the violent oppressive regime it represents is an enormous gut punch. It's no surprise that in the film version of Cabaret, this is the one song not performed in the confines of the Kit Kat Club. It represents the horror that's going to intrude on this world of singing, dancing, and good times no matter how much they try to shut it out. And even though historical perspective tells us the Nazis' defeat is as inevitable as their rise, that's no comfort in Cabaret because we know their worst atrocities are still ahead of them. For these characters, 1945 is a long way away, and the ghettos, concentration camps, and gas chambers are all too close. I'm Diva, I know the score, and I think I'll sleep with the lights on tonight.